I shouldn't be here telling you this. My name is Lucas Hayes, and I know what I saw. I know it was real, but I also know they don't want me to talk about it. For most of my life, I was like everyone else. I believed what I was told, trusted the system, followed the rules. I never questioned what was happening behind closed doors. Never thought for a second that the world was being controlled by forces we couldn't see. Then I died, and everything changed. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was just another late night, another walk home after work. The streets were quiet, empty. I remember the cold breeze against my skin, the distant sound of traffic. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular. Just another normal night, then out of nowhere, pain, a sharp, searing pain exploded in my chest. My legs gave out beneath me, and before I could even cry for help, I was falling. The pavement hit hard, the world tilted, and my vision blurred. My breath came in ragged gasps, each one weaker than the last. I was dying, and in that moment, as everything faded, a strange thought crossed my mind. Is this it? Is this how it all ends? Then, nothing. No light, no warmth, no tunnel leading to the afterlife. Just darkness, but I was still aware. I could feel something shifting around me, something vast and endless. It wasn't the comforting embrace of death. It was something else, something I wasn't supposed to experience. Then, out of the silence, came the whispers. Soft at first, like distant voices carried by the wind, but they grew louder, closer, surrounding me. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt them pressing into my mind, seeping into my thoughts. Urgent, warning. I wasn't alone. Then I felt it, something pulling me forward, an invisible force dragging me deeper into the darkness. I tried to resist, but it was useless. I was being taken somewhere, drawn towards something I couldn't see, and then I saw it. A massive hall, dimly lit, its walls stretching endlessly into the void. Figures stood in a circle, their silhouettes casting long shadows across the floor. Their faces were obscured, their voices low and deliberate. And at the center of them all, Rishi Sunak. He was speaking, his voice calm, commanding. The others listened in silence, nodding in agreement. I couldn't understand everything, but I caught fragments, pieces of something far greater than anything I had ever imagined. The transition must be completed. The world is ready. My mind screamed at me to make sense of what I was hearing. The transition. What were they planning, and why did it feel like something far bigger than politics? Then a shift in the air. Someone or something noticed me. The whispers turned into sharp, piercing noise. The figures in the circle stopped speaking. Heads turned, eyes dark and hollow, locked onto me. I wasn't supposed to be here. Panic surged through me as the shadows around me moved. Not like normal shadows, but like living things, stretching toward me, reaching. And then, in a single instant, everything collapsed. A violent force yanked me backward, pulling me out of the hall, out of the darkness, out of the whispers. The voices screamed, the shadows writhed, and then light, blinding, searing light. I gasped as I was slammed back into my body, my lungs convulsing, my heart hammering against my ribs. My eyes shot open, and for a second I didn't know where I was. I wasn't in the hall, I wasn't in the darkness. I was in my bed. The dim glow of my bedside lamp flickered. The sound of my own ragged breathing filled the air. Everything was normal, except it wasn't, because I remembered I knew what I had seen, and now I knew something even worse. They knew I had seen it too. I couldn't move. For a moment I thought I was still lying on the cold pavement, my body shutting down as the last traces of life slipped away. But no, this was something else. I felt weightless, like I was floating in an endless void. There was no pain, no air, no heartbeat, just an overwhelming silence, so deep and suffocating that it felt like the entire universe had been swallowed whole. I wasn't alone. At first I only sensed it, a presence lurking just beyond my awareness. Then the whispers returned. They came from every direction, layered over each other, murmuring in a language I couldn't understand. But I felt their meaning, urgent, demanding. I tried to move, to speak, but my body wasn't mine anymore. I was being pulled forward, dragged deeper into the abyss by an invisible force. It wasn't violent, it wasn't aggressive, but it was absolute. I had no choice. The darkness around me began to shift, swirling like liquid. Shapes formed within, its shadows stretching into impossible figures, their edges flickering like distorted images on a broken screen. Then suddenly, light. Not the warm, welcoming glow people talked about in near-death experiences. No golden gates, no tunnels leading to the afterlife. This light was harsh, sterile, unnatural. And just like that, I was no longer floating. I was somewhere. A massive structure loomed before me, unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't just a building. It was something far older, something wrong. The architecture twisted between the ancient and the futuristic, its walls lined with symbols that burned into my mind. The longer I looked at them, I tried to move, but my feet didn't touch the ground. I was being pulled forward, past towering pillars that seemed to stretch endlessly into the void above. The air around me buzzed with static, thick with something unseen, something alive. And then I heard them. Voices. Low, deliberate, speaking, in perfect unison. I turned a corner, and there they were, figures in long robes standing in a circle, their faces obscured by the dim light. They weren't speaking to each other. They were speaking to something else, something unseen. And at the center of it all, Rishi Sunak. He stood before them, his expression calm, composed. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't confused. He belonged there. I didn't. I was an intruder, and I had no idea how or why I was seeing this. Sunak raised his hand, and the room fell silent. For a moment there was nothing but the sound of the flickering. Torches along the walls, their flames casting eerie, shifting shadows. Then he spoke. The transition must be completed. The world is ready. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I had heard those words before, right before everything collapsed, right before I was ripped away from that place. What transition? What were they preparing for? I tried to move closer, desperate to understand. But the second I did, every head in the room turned toward me at the same time, eyes locked onto me, empty, soulless. They saw me. Panic surged through me. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to see this. And then the room shifted. The walls began to twist and bend, the shadows stretching toward me like living things. The air grew heavier, pressing against me from all sides. Something was pulling me back. No, not pulling, tearing. I felt myself being ripped away, my very existence unraveling. The figures in the circle didn't move, didn't speak, but I could feel them watching, their presence burning into my mind. And then a voice, not Sunak's, not the whispers. Something deeper, older, something that wasn't human. You were. Never meant to see this. A sharp pain shot through my skull, blinding and absolute, my vision fractured, splitting into 1,000 pieces. The entire world collapsed inward, folding over itself like a dying star, and then light, blinding, overwhelming, and I was falling. For a second, I felt nothing, just a weightless, endless descent. Then, all at once, pain exploded through my chest, my lungs seized. My heart convulsed, I gasped, my body jerking violently as I was slammed back into reality. I was awake. I was alive. I sucked in a desperate breath, my vision blurring, my body convulsing as if I had been yanked from the depths of the ocean. My ears rang, my skin burned, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I wasn't sure if I was really back. Then, familiar sounds, the distant hum of a heart monitor, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the soft, rhythmic beeping filling the air. I was in A hospital, how? My mind scrambled for answers. The last thing I remembered was the meeting, the figures, Sunak's voice. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my body, locking me in place. My hands trembled as I looked down at them, at the IV in my arm, at the wires attached to my chest. I was here, but I knew the truth. I had been there. And now, they knew that I knew. I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with the weight of what I had just experienced. My body ached, my muscles were stiff, and my chest still burned from the feeling of being ripped back into reality. But none of that mattered. I had seen something that wasn't meant for me. I turned my head slowly, scanning the room. It was quiet. Too quiet. No nurses, no doctors. Just the faint hum of machines monitoring my vitals. The sterile white walls felt suffocating, trapping me in a space that suddenly felt wrong. Then I noticed it. A folder. It sat on the small table beside my bed, perfectly placed, as if someone had deliberately left it there for me to find. My name was printed on the front in bold black letters. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers hovering over the cover, before finally pulling it open. What I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't just medical records, it was surveillance. There were pages upon pages of data, my online activity, my phone records, even transcripts of conversations I had never written down. Notes from unknown sources detailing my movements, my habits, my life. They had been watching me. Before the accident, before I even knew they existed, my breath caught in my throat as I flipped through the pages, each one worse than the last. And then, near the end of the folder, I found something that sent a chill straight through my core. A photo. It was grainy, low quality, like a security camera still. But there was no mistaking it. It was from the meeting, the same meeting I had witnessed during my near-death experience. The same figures standing in a circle, the same twisted architecture looming above them, and at the center of the image, Rishi Sunak. My hands tightened around the paper. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. This was real. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. It was real. The transition must be completed. The world is ready. What transition? What were they preparing for, and how was Sunak connected to all of this? I needed answers. Ignoring the pain still lingering in my body, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and reached for my phone. My fingers trembled as I typed his name into the search bar. Rishi Sunak, global policy, future plans, economic strategy. Hundreds of articles appeared, most of them the same recycled political statements. But then one stood out. A unified world, the next step in global stability. I clicked on it, my pulse racing. It was a transcript from a recent speech Sunak had given, a speech that for some reason had barely been covered by mainstream media. "We stand at the dawn of a new era," it began. "An era that demands unity, efficiency, and a reimagining of the systems we once relied on." My stomach twisted. The transition must be completed. It was there. Right there in his speech. Almost word for word. I scrolled further, my breathing shallow. The world is ready. We must ensure that the process is seamless, that no resistance stands in the way of progress. The future is not about nations, but about a singular vision, a unified order that guarantees prosperity for all. A unified order, a global transition. This wasn't just politics. This was something else, something bigger. And then a noise. A soft click just outside my hospital door. My entire body tensed. I held my breath, listening. Footsteps. Slow, controlled. Moving toward my room. Someone was coming. I shut off my phone and slid the folder back onto the table, forcing myself to lie back down. The door creaked open, and I barely managed to keep my breathing steady as a figure stepped inside. A man. Not a doctor, not a nurse. He was wearing a suit, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning the room with sharp precision. I didn't recognize him, but I knew. He knew who I was. For a long moment he just stood there, watching me. Then, finally, he spoke. "Lucas." "Hayes." His voice was calm, too calm. "You've been through quite an ordeal." I swallowed hard, my mind scrambling for a response. "Who are you?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He ignored my question. Instead, he took a step closer, folding his hands behind his back. "You saw something," he said simply, "something you weren't meant to see." A chill ran down my spine. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied. A small, knowing smile. It tugged at the corner of his lips. "Of course you do," he said, "and that puts you in a very dangerous position." I felt my hands tighten into fists beneath the blanket. "What do you want from me?" His smile didn't fade. If anything, it grew. "It's not about what we want, Mr. Hayes. It's about what you want." He pulled something from his pocket. A small, black device that looked like a flash drive. He placed it on the bedside table next to the folder. "Everything you need to know is on there," he said. "The truth. The real truth." I stared at it, my mind racing. "Why are you giving this to me?" For the first time, his expression shifted just slightly. "Because now that you've seen it, you only have two choices." He turned to leave, pausing at the door for just a second. "Forget," he said, "or disappear." And then he was gone. I sat there, my heart pounding, my mind screaming at me to make sense of it all. I reached for the device, hesitating just for a moment before finally picking it up, and as I did, one thought echoed in my mind. There's no turning back now. I sat in silence, staring at the small black device in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of the truth inside it was pressing down on me. I had a choice: forget or disappear. The man's voice echoed in my mind, his warning laced with something deeper than mere threat. It wasn't just about silencing me, it was about control. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the edge of the device. Did I really want to know? Did I really want to see what they had hidden from the world? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. There was no turning back. I plugged the device into my phone, my hands trembling as the screen flickered to life. A single file appeared, labeled simply, "The Plan." I clicked it. At first, nothing happened, just a black screen. Then words began to appear, not typed, not scrolling, just appearing. "The transition must be completed." My stomach twisted. "The world is ready." Then images, maps, timelines, documents stamped with government seals, names of world leaders, CEOs, and influential figures, each one connected by a web of red lines, like a conspiracy theorist's worst nightmare, except this wasn't a theory, it was real. I scrolled further, my pulse pounding. There were policies, agendas, detailed plans outlining the gradual restructuring of society, economic collapses, controlled conflicts, artificial crises, all orchestrated to push humanity into a single, unified system. One government, one economy, one rule. The transition wasn't about adaptation or evolution. It was about submission, a new order. And Rishi Sunak wasn't just involved. He was a key figure. I felt sick. Everything I had seen in that meeting, everything they had said was all here, laid out in horrifying clarity. They weren't hiding it. Not really. It was all happening in plain sight, buried beneath the noise of everyday life. I kept reading, my breath shallow. There were notes on digital identity systems, biometric tracking, centralized banking. Every piece of the puzzle fit together perfectly. Then a video file. I hesitated for only a second before pressing play, at first static. Then Rishi Sunak, standing at a podium, speaking to an unseen audience. "The world we knew is gone," he said, his voice calm, composed. "The systems of the past have failed, but out of the ashes we will build something greater, stronger, unified." He smiled. There is no need for fear. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The video cut to black. A single line of text appeared on the screen. You were never supposed to see this. My phone screen glitched. The file erased itself before my eyes. I yanked the device from my phone, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My body was shaking. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just seen. They knew I had accessed it. And if I had learned one thing from all of this, it was that they didn't leave loose ends. I stood up, grabbing my jacket with trembling hands. I needed to get out. I needed to move. Then my phone vibrated, a text message, no number, no sender, just a single message. They are coming. A sharp knock echoed through my apartment. I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Another knock, more urgent this time. I stepped back slowly, my mind screaming at me to run. But I already knew the truth. There was nowhere left to run. This message, this warning, might be the last thing I ever share. So if you're hearing this, if this story has reached you, you need to understand. It's real. The transition is happening. They are controlling everything. And if you don't act now, if you don't start questioning, sharing, spreading the truth, you won't even notice when the world you once knew is gone. Because by then, it will already be too late.